Good morning. My name is Cindy Forster. I am the MPP for Welland and the Critic for the New Democrats for Labour. Here today with me on my left is Larry Rousseau, Public Service Alliance of Canada's Regional Executive Vice President for the National Capital Region. And we have two employees with us from the Rideau Carleton Racetrack in Ottawa. On my right is Laura Perry, a slot technician, and left of Larry is Don Kirkbride, a PSAC local vice president. Laura, Don, and over 100 of their co-workers have been locked out of their workplace since December, simply because of their request at the bargaining table to allow them and their families to retire in dignity. They boarded buses in Ottawa at 2 a.m. this morning to join us here at Queen's Park today and demand that the Liberal government finally speak up and intervene in this long labor dispute. For years, we've seen the Liberal government talk about rolling out a public pension plan for all Ontarians. And recently, we've seen them drag their feet on that promise, delaying the implementation to appease their friends. And sure, recently they introduced legislation around the ORPP, but I say that that's doublespeak. The Liberal government talks a good game about secure income at retirement, but from what we'll hear from the folks that are here with us today, that are OLG workers, the Liberal government, through the OLG, is trying to take away their pension security. So we're joined by about 100 of these workers today. They're all employees of the OLG, the Ontario Gaming and Lottery Corporation, and they'll be here for a rally after question period today. These are employees who have a public pension plan, and they're here to demand that the Liberal Premier, Kathleen Wynne, put a stop to the OLG trying to gut it. So on one hand, the government is promising a public pension plan for all Ontarians, but they're allowing the OLG at the same time to wipe out those pensions that already exist for workers in this province. It makes no sense, and it shows a clear and blatant attack on hardworking families in the province. A plan to privatize, which will drive down wages, a plan to get rid of pensions and to reduce benefits for the hard workers at OLG. To be clear, the OLG is a Crown corporation, meaning that it takes direction from the government. In an effort to modernize the Crown Corporation, the Liberal government is allowing the OLG to not only freeze workers' wages, I believe since 2009, but to remove any pension language from their collective agreement. All of this is in an effort to make the facilities more attractive to the private sector, putting profit before families. Early last year, we saw the Liberal government shield its privatization plans under the guise of optimization with the fire sale of Hydro One. This plan is being hidden under the guise of modernization. So by forcing workers, the workers that are here with us today, to give up their pensions, the Liberals are really grooming their assets to make them more attractive to private sector buyers. And who will be next? The Liberal Premier has done nothing to make sure that the OLG returns to the bargaining table. It's allowed them to lock out these employees right before Christmas, so they've been out on the street for almost 3 months. They've had their wages frozen for 6 years, and they want to eliminate any mention of a pension in their collective agreements. I believe this is an attack on the hardworking employees at this facility and on their families, and the Liberal is increasingly out of touch with the workers in this province. Ontario New Democrats believe that everybody in the province deserves to retire with dignity, and we believe that those benefits can only be enjoyed with good jobs, with good pensions, and with good wages. Unfortunately, what we see today is a Liberal government that's not only stayed silent as these workers and their families have been robbed of what they rightfully deserve, but a Liberal government that continues to forge ahead, making short-sighted decisions that grow out of touch with the priorities of our province workers and their families. So I'm now going to pass it on to Larry Rousseau, who is the PSAC Regional Executive Vice President for the National Capital Region, to speak on the issue in a little more detail.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you for all the work that you do in defending and helping workers in Ontario. It's very appreciated. And thank to all of you who are in attendance today. The 124 workers at the Rideau Carleton Raceway slots were locked out on December 16th last year. So next week will be 3 months. They have not received a raise since 2009. That has been 6 years. And during this time, the cost of living in Ottawa increased by slightly more than 9% cumulatively, meaning that they all experienced a pay cut in each and every one of these years. So the workers have asked for wage increases that will help them catch up to the cost of living. They're not asking for anything unreasonable here. OLG, despite pulling in $2 billion in profits per year, refused to give them a decent wage. Instead, OLG insisted on freezing wages for these workers for another 2 years. OLG also insisted that the workers accept removal of existing pension language from their current contract, which is a massive concession under any circumstance. These workers, of course, rejected these shocking demands as any other group of workers would. In fact, they rejected it overwhelmingly at 96% vote. OLG punished them for doing this by locking them out right before the holidays and pushing them out into Ottawa's harsh winter cold. Ottawa is the snowiest and coldest capital in the world. So what does this have to do with privatization? We firmly believe that OLG is forcing these workers into accepting low wages and giving up their pension language in order to make gaming operations more attractive to private sector buyers as part of OLG's so-called modernization plan. We already know, as Cindy just explained, that the privatization scheme is going to be disastrous. Indeed, the Auditor General's report by Bonnie Lisk already said in 2014 that the OLG's modernization plan was overly ambitious and had unrealistic profit projections. In fact, the Auditor General predicted that under the privatization scheme, profit would in fact drop to $1.84 billion by 2018, rather than increase to $2.4 billion as OLG has projected. She also has predicted job losses. We also know from recent lottery privatization efforts in the United States, including in New Jersey, Illinois, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, that private firms are very often unable to deliver on promised revenue targets. Yet, OLG, with support from the Kathleen Wynne government, is foolishly running headstrong towards privatization at great cost to its workers and, in the future, a cost to the public. Here in Toronto, PSAC also has over 400 members at the Woodbine Gaming Centre and another 400 members at the OLG head office in Sault Ste. Marie. We want to make sure that all these workers are able to keep their pensions. On behalf of OLG workers across Ontario, we call on Kathleen Wynne and Finance Minister Charles Sousa to instruct OLG to stop treating its workers with such disrespect. Ms. Wynne cannot, on the one hand, claim to support better pensions for Ontarians, and on the other hand, try to force Crown employees into giving up their pensions. I would now like to turn it over to two locked-out workers at the Rideau Carleton Raceway slots who will speak about their own experiences. First, we'll have Laura, who is a senior slot technician, enormous experience, one of the first, if not the first, female slot technician in Ontario, senior slot technician. And then we'll have Dawn Kirkbride, who is a vice president of the local at the slots in Rideau Carleton. Thank you very much.
My name is Laura Perry. I've been, up until 85 days ago, a senior slot technician at Rideau Carleton. I've worked for the OLG for 17 years. Or almost 17 years. And in that time, I've always given 110%. Said I've never had time to pay attention to union issues up until this point because I was too busy with the heavy workload that I had. I came in early, I worked late, and I haven't taken breaks for several years to keep up with the workload that I've had, which has increased as they've decentralized their warehouses and offloaded all of the work onto the individual casinos. On December 15th, when I was at work, my keys were removed at 9:45 p.m., and I was told, along with everyone else that was working that night, to leave the building by 10 p.m. and not to return because we would be considered trespassing. When I went the next day to vote on the offer that we had received from the OLG, which was 1.75% for the 3-year contract that is now ending, and a removal of all pension language, I was told that the OLG had canceled our health coverage, along with everything else that they were doing to us. PSAC asked the OLG if they would allow them to pay the premiums while we were locked out, and the OLG refused. So for me, this posed a really big problem because I have an incurable neurological disease that requires a lot of medication. But I'm one of the lucky ones because there are people that I work with who have families that rely on this coverage because they have people in their families who are very ill and need their lives depend on the care that they receive under this coverage. So when that was cut off, it posed serious problems for them. And I wonder how Premier Wynne would feel if she were in the same position as we have been. Like many of the people in this province, we all hope someday, and I've been there 17 years, to retire and have money to spend on frivolous things like food and hydro. But now we're in a position where we don't have any guarantee that we'll ever be able to retire because they want to remove every bit of pension language from our collective agreement, which is highly unfair. We've watched all of these expensive commercials that the Liberals run all of the time about their fancy pensions and the things that they want to do in their secure pensions. I've heard Premier Wynne speak about the need for secure pensions for everybody in this province, and yet at the same time, she's taking everything that we have away from us. Now, right now, as we speak, they are in the process of hiring replacement workers, scabs, at Rideau Carleton, which could not happen if we were in British Columbia, could not happen if we were in Quebec. In Quebec, they passed legislation in 1978. In British Columbia, they passed legislation to prevent such things in 1993. In 2010, MPP France Jelena tabled Bill 45 that would have prevented the Ontario government from treating us in such a way, from canceling our benefits and hiring scab workers. But it was voted down by the Liberal government at the time. Right now, the OLG and Ms. Wynne need to do the right thing. They need to go back to the bargaining table. They need to restore our pension language. They need to give us pay increases to make up for all of the freezes that we've been through, and they need to get us back to work.
I'm not the kind of person who's looking for much out of life. Maybe a steady job, benefits, pension, healthy family, and a comfortable home. And after many years of struggle, I thought I had found that with OLG. Only a year later, I find myself to be locked out. This lockout has a direct impact on myself, as well as my family members, both financially and emotionally. I have a daughter in college and one who is 4 years of age just starting school. My youngest daughter is used to her dad coming home at night, and since this lockout, my husband has had to work away from home and isn't home more than twice a week anymore. And this is in order to compensate for financial loss from this lockout. This is also a challenge for my daughter's emotional stability. Luckily, with the strong support of my family in helping with childcare, because since being locked out, I can no longer afford childcare, and without it, I could not participate in our lockout actions. Many of my coworkers are not as fortunate as I am and are going into financial hardship. This has also changed my role in my family dynamics. It has changed how I contribute towards my family financially, considering I'm used to being an equal contributor. It has caused emotional distress. It has changed my day-to-day routine. It's shifted my sense of self-value and contributes to my doubts of being a good role model for my daughters. This lockout has changed the course of my future retirement. when they're trying to remove the pension language from our collective agreement, which makes me question, will there be anything for my daughter's future and all the other youth when they seek their careers? OLG claims their values are built on integrity, respect, and accountability. But what have they done with us?
Well, I want to thank Larry Russo and Laura Perry and Don Kirkbride for being here with us today. Lisa McLeod has also joined us in the studio, the MPP for that riding. Welcome, Lisa. I also want to encourage people to tune in to question period, because we're going to be asking the Premier to answer questions about why the government isn't intervening and getting these hardworking people back to work so that they can earn a living and support their families. We'll also be having a rally on the Queen's Park grounds at noon today, so feel free to come out and join us. Thanks very much for your attention.